Hello, my name is Aim, and thank you for joining me today on the channel as I begin House of the Dragon. Now, I say begin, but I already kind of started House of the Dragon. Now, before I go any further, the reaction portion itself was recorded um, pretty close to air date, a few days after, I believe. And, this is going to be a unique situation because it's going to be the first and last hybrid, essentially, because the reaction portion was actually recorded at my old place. As you can see, I'm at a new location. There's a new backdrop. I am in a new place. I moved to a new location, to a new home, essentially. I know many of you know about this through Patreon, through comments, community posts, or Twitter. But there's probably going to be many of you that might be a little bit confused about this, right? So again, before I actually get into the meat of it, I just wanted to clarify, the intro right now, it's a new intro I'm recording to clarify this. And then the post-episode portion is also recorded here. But the reaction portion was recorded at the old location, at the old place. It was just a really strange and kind of unique situation because I was able to record it, but like almost immediately, soon after, on the same day, essentially, I had to dismantle the recording space or the room, my recording room. Yeah, and that was essentially the last thing that had to be moved. It was kind of like I do have time to record it, but not quite enough time to record a post-episode portion as well. And, it was also kind of like, do I try to dodge all these spoilers for the next, 5-6 days, or should I just record right now as I do have the chance? So yeah, that's the reason the intro and the outro are going to be different from the reaction portion itself. I'm explaining this, but I know there's going to be so many that are just going to skip the intro and go straight to the reaction portion. And then be confused about it, but that's just the nature of things. But in that sense, it is also quite fitting that House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon is or was the last thing I recorded at that place. Because indeed that was the same place I started YouTube in, right? And all that time ago, it was through Game of Thrones, right? So yeah, it was a nice little bookend. And of course, since it is a new place, it is going to take some time to kind of experiment, right? Try a few different things out. As you can notice, there is a bit of an echo in this space right now. Essentially, I kind of still have to get up the sound treatment panels, and they're quite effective. They're really quite effective. So once I do have those up, essentially right in front of me, because right now a lot of the voice is bouncing right off of this wall in front of me, and all over the room. I mean, there is a little bit of sound treatment. There's a carpet, and then there is a curtain to the left here, a sound curtain. But yeah, for now, there is a bit of echo because I do need some help putting them up. It's like a two-man job. So yes, for a little bit, there is going to be a bit of an echo, but I think it's still quite watchable. But yeah, I think that's about it for that. This is going to end up being quite the intro here, quite the lengthy intro. But let's get into the show at hand, the pilot at hand. Yes, this intro is kind of being re-recorded so I could explain a few things. So I've seen the first episode by now, as of this point. But, I'll kind of try to repeat the things I said in the intro that I recorded at the other place. Of course, this is always a lock. It was always going to happen on the channel, given my history, right? And, speaking of history, I'm really quite excited to see, or I hope, I am quite hopeful that I do see some familiar names from years ago, perhaps people that did find me through Game of Thrones all those years ago. So, for me, that is another exciting aspect of this. Seeing some of those familiar names, those familiar profile pics. I do have a knack for remembering, names and profile pics. So yeah, that should be fun, hopefully. But yeah, House of the Dragon. Now, first things first, I should go through the things I know about House of the Dragon and the things I don't know. First of all, I do have the book, Fire and Blood, but I have not read it, right? I have not read it at this point. Ultimately, I ended up making the same choice, I'll let the show do its take first, and then I'll get to the book, right? Though, even though I did have the book, it's not as if I was actively about to get to it. I had it, but I just didn't really have a chance to even get to it. But the fact that the show was around the corner and is here now, I just decided, like many others, I have many friends that kind of did the same thing. I just kind of decided to hold off on Fire and Blood. I'll watch the show and then I'll go to the book itself. Now, I do know a few things, right? I do know a few things, and some of it is quite exciting. Now, I know that Fire and Blood is kind of presented in a different manner, almost as a history book, apparently, right? Or it's kind of like written by maesters, right? Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I try not to really look into it too much this close to the show about to air. But yeah, so there is this aspect of it being told from a certain perspective, unreliable narrator, even perhaps. That's the terminology I've heard from another friend. And in that sense, there's also the possibility of an agenda, egos, right? Imagine being in that position, being in the position to write some of these histories. So of course, there is a possibility of liberties being taken, right? And the presentation of the show is not in that format, right? So there is that exciting prospect of this being a true telling, right? That's a terminology another friend used, right? So of course, even for the book readers, even for people who have read Fire and Blood, there could be some exciting new things. And of course, in that sense, since George himself is a part of this, he kind of gets to add on to it, and he kind of gets to change things, right? So that aspect of it is quite exciting. Now then, the elephant in the room. Essentially, I mean, you can't really even call it a spoiler, right? It's a part of the show. It was a part of the show, and I'm speaking of Joffrey, right? That infamous scene at this point. But yeah, that scene in the sept, he tells Marjorie quite a specific portion of that story, of this story, unfortunately. But again, you can't really call it a spoiler. It's not. It was, it was a part of that show. It was a part of that story, part of that history, right? So yeah, he tells her something quite substantial, something that does kind of sound like the conclusion to all of this. Now, before I go any further, I'm not going to say it out loud just in case there are people who just don't remember, right? I happen to remember, but, of course, there might be other people who've seen Game of Thrones who just might not remember, right? And there's also, that other scene, not as spoilery, but it's Shireen and Stannis in the tent, and Shireen is describing the Dance of Dragons. So yeah, there's that. But also, don't remind people of it. Yes, maybe some people forgot about that scene. Let it be. Don't be that person who goes into the comment sections and goes, "Oh, it's not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler. They already said this in Game of Thrones." It's not for you to decide that, right? Let them be. If someone's forgotten about it, let it be. But let's kind of really get on with this. The intro is getting quite long here. In terms of things I'm excited for, the actors, Matt Smith, big fan of Matt Smith. I've become a big fan of Matt Smith. I've always known about Matt Smith, of course, mainly because of Doctor Who, and I knew that he is one of the doctors, and, I'm in that era of Doctor Who now on the channel. Yes, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but for those who know, I've been loving Matt Smith in that role. I think he's brilliant. In that role. And it'll be so exciting to see him in a totally different type of role here as Daemon Targaryen. Yeah, I'm really quite excited. I have no doubts that Matt Smith is going to crush this. Really. I'm not just saying this because of the bias, I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of Matt Smith. You could objectively tell he's got the skill set. Right? The acting ability, the chemistry that he's able to build. So I'm really quite excited for Matt Smith, of course. In terms of the other actors, I don't really know too many of them. I've heard of them. I've heard of some of them. Patty, I've heard of Patty. Though another actor I do know is Sonoya Mizuno. Big fan of her as well. She's playing Miss Arya. So yeah, you know, I'm really quite excited for her in this as well. Interesting. It's an interesting casting, isn't it? And the role she's playing here. And you know, leading up to this, I did check out some of the press junkets. And you know, I've got to say, Emma was the standout for me at least. You know, Emma was really quite fascinating to listen to, right? I could listen to her speak for hours, really, if I'm being honest. Impressive. You know, Emma's really quite impressive, and I'm really excited to see Emma in that role as Rhaenyra. Though I've got to say, you know, again, you know, I don't want to jump too far ahead. I've got to say, you know, Millie as Rhaenyra in episode 1 was delightful. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, more on that later. But you know, in terms of the storyline of this, the Dance of Dragons, yeah, you know, it's a family feud. I know it's meant to be the Civil War that escalates to quite tremendous heights, right? And yeah, I know that much. But you know, in that sense, I think the key to that is these two sides, right? There's already good signs here that it's going to be quite nuanced. You know, clearly there's no signs of good or evil, good against evil. No, you know, and I was really glad to kind of see that. This is going to be quite interesting, actually. Okay, so that's about it for this intro. I know it's quite a long intro, but you know, this is kind of like a one-time thing. You know, at the beginning of the show, really wanted to get some of these thoughts out there. But yeah, you know, thank you for joining me and thank you for your time. And let's get into it. So here is the reaction to episode 1, and then I'll get into the post-episode portion. I hope you enjoy.
The health of the old king, Jaehaerys, was failing.
Oh, this is Emma.
No power in the world could stand against it.
Wow.
King Jaehaerys reigned over nearly 60 years of peace and prosperity.
Harrenhal, right?
For he knew the cold truth. The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon
was the House of the Dragon themselves. Yeah. Whoa. Oh. This dragon pit. King's Landing looking really nice. Whoa. She actually kind of does remind you of Dany, doesn't she? At least from the back.
Syrax is growing quickly. She'll soon be as large as Caraxes.
Caraxes.
Almost large enough to settle too. I believe I'm quite content as a spectator. Thank you.
It's good to be back. Whoa, whoa, this looks damn good in 4K, folks. Some fantastic establishing shots.
This discomfort is how we serve the realm.
I'd rather serve as a knight and ride to battle in glory.
Kind of like Arya. She's so cute.
The childbed is our battlefield. We must learn to face it with a stiff lip.
I was visiting mother.
Not negligible. Perhaps we might delay until the child is in.
Oh. Wow, look at this shot. Fabian. Matt Smith.
It's Valyrian steel. Like Dark Sister.
Dark Sister. That's his sword, right?
Turn around.
And then Blackfire is Viserys' sword. This is beautiful. I'm loving the color grading for this. It was really noticeable in the trailers. Oh, yeah. Beautiful indeed.
I want to fly with you on Dragonback, see the great wonders across the narrow sea, and eat only cake.
I'm being serious.
I never just about cake.
You aren't worried about your position?
I like this position. It's quite comfortable.
Yeah, I was gonna say. There's a cute relationship going on here, I think.
Where are you going?
Home.
Look at
Now
that.
has grown late.
She even named her
Dare I ask?
Visenya.
His family already has its Visenya.
Is that so? Damon,
Has
perhaps?
there been any word from your dear brother?
Not since I named him commander of the City Watch.
I've lost one babe in the cradle.
Had 2 stillbirths and 2 pregnancies ended well before their term.
Wow. That's ominous. It is ominous. Daemon Targaryen, Matt Smith. Go on then. Whoa. Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing that promo photo of that armor. Yeah, I was gonna say, the costume design. Of course. On par. Dark Sister? Holy shit. That armor is insane.
Brother?
Damon.
Carry on. You were saying something about my impunity.
Ooh.
If only the prince would show the same devotion to his lady wife as he does his work.
Oh.
You've not been seen in the Vale or at Runestone for quite some time.
I think my bronze bitch is happier for my absence.
Lady Rhea is your wife.
Gladly give Lady Rhea to you, Lord Hightower, if you're in want of a woman to warm your bed.
Ooh.
Your own lady wife passed recently.
Ooh. There's a lot of friction here. Stunning though. It looks beautiful.
Perhaps you aren't ready to move on just yet.
You know how my brother makes sport of provoking you.
Yeah, he's an instigator.
Indulge him.
Oh, there's gonna be more Otto and Daemon friction for sure, right? Ah, there she is. But this is not how I thought I was gonna see her. But there she is. That look on her face, she could tell. Wow, look at this.
An arrangement with Silveria.
This is a different side of Daemon
You
right
are
here.
Daemon Targaryen.
I do love some low light candle shots.
I know many of you have traveled long leagues to be
Look
at
at
this game.
this.
May the luck of the Seven shine upon all combatants.
Costume design. There's a standard, of course, right? They had to keep up.
I would gladly take it.
Baratheon.
I needed it.
And the fact that he's just unhorsed both of the Baratheon lads, I really couldn't say.
Otto was kind of listening in. He's trying to be discreet about it. I knew I'm gonna like Otto. The hand to the king is always going to be someone really interesting, right? The sigil.
Sir Gawain, High Tower of Old Town, eldest
Old Town.
of the hand of the king.
He targeted him. Damon, I knew this is gonna get messy. Wow. This is like high fantasy right here, man, on our screens. Yeah. That's gotta be tough though, you know?
Nicely done, Uncle.
Thank you, Princess.
The swagger though.
Having your favor would always assure.
Yeah. Look at this. Whoa.
It's all right. It's all right.
It's kind of like Ned and Lyanna. Wow. That's quite the cut. That is quite the transition. She did say that's our battlefield, right? But the track record's not the greatest either, right? For the child to survive. Wow, the detail. See this? Wow, this has always been the real deal. It doesn't look plasticky or fake, right? It feels lived in. Dirty, grimy. That, yeah, it sounded like a knife. That transition, the sound effect. Wow, look at this shot. Oh my god.
I'm making the first incision. Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. Look at these shots though. You just got bodied, my dude. Get up. Oh.
Congratulations, Your Grace.
You have a son.
Wow. Look at this. That look. I don't know, Viserys. You kind of lost me there. Oh, yeah. Bit of a different side again of Daemon. The delivery of that. It's sounding really authentic. Yeah, Daemon is not just... Interesting transition there.
It could destabilize the realm.
The realm? Or this council?
No one can know what Daemon would do were he king, but no one can doubt his ambition.
And she already has a male
Just
heir.
moments ago, you announced your support for Daemon.
If we cannot agree on an heir, then how can we
My
expect
wife
a realm?
and son are dead! I will not sit here and suffer crows that come to feast on their corpses!
A feast of crows, eh?
My darling. How's
Wow.
Rhaenyra? I thought you might go to him. Offer him comfort.
Oh.
You might wear one of your mother's dresses.
Man has his own ideas and goals, doesn't he, Otto?
I do know how passionate you are for the histories.
Yes.
Yeah, as he looks on.
I have only ever defended you! Yet everything I've given you, you've thrown back in my face!
And the blood of the dragon runs thick.
Then why do you cut me so deep?
I've only ever spoken the truth. I see Otto Hightower for what he is.
An unwavering and loyal
A
hand.
cunt! You're weak, Viserys. And that Council of Leeches knows it. They all prey on you for their own ends.
I've seen that in action already. Wow, look at this. Blackfire in hand as he dismisses Daemon Targaryen. Valerion. The Black Dread. That's the track Ramen shared.
The very best of your mother.
And shall defend them against all enemies, in good faith and without deceit.
Interesting. Wow. Great focus pull there. Caraxes.
I swear. When this great winter comes, Rhaenyra, all of Westeros must stand against it.
Oh my god.
And if the world of men is to survive, a Targaryen must be seated on the Iron Throne. Aegon called his dream the Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh.
This secret, it's been passed from king to heir since Aegon's time. Promise me this, Rhaenyra.
Promise me, eh? It's a bombshell. A game changer.
An heir to the Iron Throne.
There it is. Allison. And the dragons roared. Hey! Miguel Sapochnik, okay. Right then, that's episode 1 of House of the Dragon. First of all, of course, I need to get into something that's a bit of a bombshell right at the end there. A bit of a game changer. Kind of recontextualizes a few things, doesn't it? And I'm speaking of Aegon's prophecy, right? A song of ice and fire as he holds on to the cat's paw blade, right? I mean, that is an iconic item. That feels like an understatement. That is a legendary item. That is something so important, right? And isn't it so exciting to see it at different points in history, at different points in time, and the journey it kind of goes on, right? The trajectory it kind of goes on to ultimately kill the Night King, right? That's the dagger that Arya uses to kill the Night King. You have to assume that Bran or the new three-eyed raven, knew all about the history of that cat's paw blade. Of course, it's quite deliberate to show him kind of squeezing onto it as he's speaking of, or as he's sharing this prophecy, right? Aegon's prophecy, A Song of Ice and Fire. Whereas, it's essentially Aegon's interpretation of it. And of course, there's that possibility of it kind of changing, right? Kind of becoming something else. Things being added to it, or things being left out, right? And that's just the nature of it, right? As it kind of goes through generation to generation. Yeah, right? So there is certainly that possibility. And, you kind of have to assume that it kind of gets lost with Rhaegar Targaryen as he dies on the Trident, as Big Bobby B swings that hammer and takes out Rhaegar Targaryen. So, as of this point, I guess, I can assume that that's how it just kind of dies. A Song of Ice and Fire, that Rhaegar knew about this prophecy as well. Again, you kind of go back to Game of Thrones and some of the established history. Rhaegar was big into prophecies, and apparently he had a change of heart, a change of attitude after coming across a particular or specific prophecy, right? The prince that was promised. That's the name of the track, that beautiful new track that Ramen shared on Twitter a few days before this episode aired. And you see that it's there, it's present during that scene. It's an incredible scene, right? In that dungeon, in that crypt. I think it's a dungeon, Balerion, the Black Dread skull. And yeah, it looked quite a bit larger than the last time I saw it in Game of Thrones, right? So yeah, love seeing that, right? So yeah, A Song of Ice and Fire, apparently conquest wasn't the only reason Aegon came over. And, again, he kind of mentions that a Targaryen must always be on the throne, right? It kind of parallels how there always must be a Stark in the north, right? Yeah, there's a lot of interesting parallels there. There's a strong possibility that the Stark side also knew this, and they also kind of shared it from generation to generation. But if that is the case, if that is a possibility, there's also a possibility of that being lost on the Stark side as well, right? Because of the Mad King taking out Ned Stark's brother and father. I'm thinking of moments like Torrhen Stark bending the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, right? Aegon Targaryen. Is there a possibility that Aegon actually shared that information? But, that being said, it's not even a given, or it's not even necessary that that's how the Starks might have known about this. The Starks, they have connections, and they have, that bloodline. They have their own, they have their own roots in a lot of this. You go back to Bran the Builder, right? The Age of Heroes and all that. So, yeah, I think there is a possibility that, the Song of Ice and Fire, it's been passed down. This prophecy has been passed down, of course, on the Targaryen end, because of Aegon's dream. Dragon dreams are a big thing. You see Viserys himself has his own dream in this one. Parts of it are accurate. And then there's also really cool things like, if you go to Game of Thrones season 7, the cave paintings, right? That's at Dragonstone, right? So surely, the Targaryens must have come across that as well at some point, right? Seeing those paintings in there. Of course, there's quite a distinct parallel to, young Ned Stark and Lyanna on her deathbed, promise me, Ned. And then here you have Viserys and Rhaenyra, promise me, right? To protect this and to carry this dream, this prophecy. Again, as the prince that was promised plays in the background, though it kind of goes into that iconic theme from Game of Thrones, right? Can't quite remember the exact name of the track, but it's Daenerys. It's her theme. It's one of her themes. It's a beautiful scene, right? I thought it was the perfect bookend to this episode, as it kind of cuts back and forth, right? Rhaenyra being named the next in line. But, kind of going back to the ending there, wow. The costume design, impressive. And it kind of, there was quite a high bar set in terms of, Michelle Clapton and in Game of Thrones. So, I've got to say, one episode in, I think it meets that standard. And it kind of really had to. A thing I really liked about this is that it felt like it didn't feel like something foreign. It didn't feel like, oh, this is a different type of look or feel. It legitimately felt like, I'm right back into that same universe, that same place. It kind of maintains that look and feel, yet it was also able to add its own unique perspective to it as well. The color palette is quite noticeable. The color grading, I really quite enjoyed or appreciated the color grading. And I feel like, the color palette, the color grading, it really aids in that whole aspect of this being the height, right, of the Targaryen dynasty. Decadence is a term that's been used a lot by Ryan Condal, right, in the lead up to this. So yeah, you see that. I thought they were really quite effective in depicting that in this first episode. Yet still maintaining that familiar tone and feel of King's Landing, right? Being in that universe again. And like I mentioned during the reaction, Game of Thrones and now House of the Dragon, following in its footsteps, it really is the only show, high budget show on television that is able to kind of sell that lived in feeling, right? It feels real, it feels raw. Unfortunately, some of these other shows, The Witcher, I couldn't even get past the third episode of that show. I tried twice, just couldn't do it. It just didn't do it for me. Personally, I didn't even like Cavill in that role, and I love Henry Cavill, but in that role, didn't do it for me for some reason. I thought I would like it, but no, I didn't. But that's a prime example of a fantasy setting feeling a bit too pristine, a bit too plasticky. I don't know. Everything just felt that it was placed, and like I was not able to kind of pull back and not notice some of these things. Here in House of the Dragon and again in Game of Thrones, you don't notice that aspect of it, right? And that's a good thing. You're not distracted by some of these things that are sticking out like sore thumbs. Yeah, House of the Dragon continues that tradition of being the gold standard. In terms of fantasy on television, HBO has it on lockdown. They've had it on lockdown since Game of Thrones, and now it continues. Now, I know Michelle Clapton isn't a part of this, but whoever came in, yeah, they've done a phenomenal job here, I think. Other than maybe one dress that Rhaenyra had on, yeah, it was just, wow. It was really quite impressive. And then, of course, you go to the tourney. A lot of it's on display there, right? Be it through some of these highborns up in the stands, right? Viserys, wow. But down below, the armor, wow. I love the armor. The distinct looks, the colors, right? Here it feels like House of the Dragon is kind of leaning a bit more into the colorful aspect of the houses, the different houses, right? Game of Thrones, it wasn't low key about it, but it was really grounded, wasn't it? It just felt really good to, be back in there, to be back at it, to see these sights. And yeah, at no point did I get that feeling of, oh, this feels a little cheap, feels a little plasticky, pristine. No, it felt lived in. Yet it also felt kind of, flamboyant. It also felt that it is the height of the Targaryen dynasty, right? Decadence and all that. Yeah, I was impressed by that aspect of it for sure. And, speaking of some of the other technical elements, the production design, right? The set design. Wow. The score, of course, Ramin Djawadi, a crucial component of Game of Thrones, one of the most important aspects of Game of Thrones. I think that is a game changer to have him, right? I think that's a deal breaker. I feel like if you don't have Ramin Djawadi, then it really loses a bit of its identity, right? If you have someone else entirely new, I'm sure it would have been decent. It would have been solid, of course. There's a lot of great musicians and composers out there, but, securing Ramin Djawadi for this, much like securing Miguel Sapochnik for this, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. But, more so, in my opinion, Ramin Djawadi. That is, yeah, good for them. In my mind, I always thought, okay, first order of business, or one of the things that should be really high on the list is you have to secure Ramin Djawadi. You really do, and bring him back in. The photography of this episode, cannot forget that. That was top notch. That was top tier stuff. Fabian, or Fabian, for those who know, he's been on Game of Thrones as well. He was there quite a bit throughout the run. So, I was really quite happy to find out that he is doing the pilot for House of the Dragon. And yeah, it shows, man. It shows. It was beautiful stuff. Beautiful. The visual storytelling of this was really quite exciting to me. It really spoke to me. And there's some stunners in here. The Daemon, Kristen Cole getting Daemon during that tilt, knocking him backwards and him kind of grinding on the railing, right? The dynamic shots following Daemon as he's kind of grinding on there. Wow, that felt unique. That felt dynamic. So I love seeing that. You could see that they've utilized a really specific type of lens for a few of these shots. The introduction of Daemon Targaryen, that in itself, the introduction to Daemon Targaryen, Matt Smith's Daemon Targaryen, that is a fantastic introduction to Daemon. That itself, it really tells you quite a bit about the disposition of Daemon Targaryen. But yeah, in terms of the photography there, that one shot that's kind of panning from behind the throne. Oh, beautiful stuff, man. But, it also had this ominous feeling to it, right? As you see, Rhaenyra is framed in the top right corner, right? And you see the blades kind of almost, pointing towards her. I mean, not almost, they are, that felt quite deliberate, right? She's being kind of framed into a corner and the blades pointing towards her. Wow, great shot. And kind of also leaning into that whole aspect of the throne being the most dangerous seat in the world, right? Position in the world, as Viserys tells his daughter Rhaenyra, right? Dragon saddle is one thing, but the Iron Throne, yeah, that's something else. And of course, I love the hybrid look for the throne itself. Really digging it, right? So it did a good job of kind of building on the throne from Game of Thrones, and then kind of leaning a bit into the book description of it, right? So yeah, it looks damn cool. It does. It's quite menacing. It does have that menacing feel to it, doesn't it? And they're leaning into it. Given some of these shots that I'm describing again here. But the one shot, and I'm speaking of Daemon, right? It cuts to Daemon on the throne. Wow. You could tell a really specific type of lens is being used for that. And I know it's being shot on the Ari. So yeah, it is probably some sort of Ari lens. But wow, I love the use of that there. You see that the corners they kind of fall off, right? They fall off. But the center is really quite sharp. The sharpness of the center really draws the attention, or the audience's attention, to the middle of the frame. That's a really unique lens, or look, or character of a lens in that situation that is being utilized, right? And Greg Fraser really leaned into that type of approach, or that look, for the Batman, the new Batman, Robert Pattinson's Batman. That film is full of these shots. I mean, it's almost exclusively utilizing that type of shot, that type of lens and approach. Now, before I get into the characters, the episode itself, I thought it was a great episode. I really did. I thought it was a great pilot. I'm not saying it's one of the greatest pilots of all time or anything, but it was a solid pilot. I don't think anyone can deny that, right? It was a great pilot. I felt that it actually did feel restrained, right? And that's a good thing here, right? It didn't feel like it's a spectacle for the sake of being a spectacle, right? I felt that, it did a great job of character introductions and, the exposition as well. It did a great job at utilizing the transitional hinge quite effectively. I thought the editing was really spot on as well. It was noticeable, great editing. And it also felt highly cinematic. It had all those elements. And then also the acting, there's certainly a few standouts here. I've got to say Patty as Viserys was one of the standouts for sure. That final scene there in the throne room, Patty and Matt Smith, I thought that was a fantastic scene. And Patty specifically in that scene, Yeah, he was phenomenal. But yeah, I felt like his acting here was quite noticeable throughout the episode as one of the standouts. But yeah, that throne room scene was one of the standouts, alongside some of the council meetings, the small council meetings. I really enjoyed those in this episode, and I'm happy to have those back. You know, the political drama, the political aspect to this, you know, it's good to be back. It's good to have that back. And, you know, there are some promising characters that can hold their own, right? You know, I'm speaking of characters like Otto Hightower. Wow. I knew I'm going to like that character. I mean, he is quite ambitious, that's for sure. And, you know, you see that Damon, Damon might be a bit of a maverick, quite mercurial, yet he keeps it real, right? You see that he cares about his family, right? He wants to protect his family. He wants to protect his brother, Viserys. And, you know, to do that, he feels like he needs to be upfront. He needs to be truthful, even if it cuts deep, even if it stings. But he's keeping it real. And, you know, he's essentially one of the only few who can be upfront, who can be this open. Because he sees the things around his brother. He sees the situation and the people around his brother. He sees the small council. He knows that, you know, they're circling around him. You know, that they can kind of manipulate him, or they try to manipulate him as much as they can. And of course, you know, Damon sees this. These people on the council are quite intelligent. They see this as well then, right? They sense that in the king. He's not the type of king that kind of craves this, right? Even in the beginning, right, in the cold open, it's a phenomenal cold open at Harrenhal, and you know, the location of that, the setting of that, even that feels quite deliberate. That feels quite deliberate, you know, to hold that or to stage it there at Harrenhal, given how things played out at Harrenhal, right? So I thought that was really quite juicy to hold it there, almost kind of serving as this background reminder to everyone that's present, right? But even there, you know, Viserys' reaction to being named next in line, yeah, you know, it's not, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but, you know, it didn't feel like he was overjoyed or anything. It was kind of like, okay, all right, so that happened, that's going to happen, so I'm next in line, eh? But yeah, you know, you don't get the feeling that he kind of craves this power. And, you know, Damon sees Otto for who he is, right? The type of person he is. And, you know, Otto knows, if, you know, Damon was to be king, Otto's out immediately. Like, he would dismiss Otto immediately. So you see throughout this episode, you know, that friction, that juicy friction that I really enjoyed, and I hope to see more of. Though, at the end there, you know, Damon did get banished, kind of. I mean, but yeah, you know, I hope to see a bit more of that down the line, hopefully. You know, Otto and Damon, that back and forth, really quite enjoyable. Damon knows how to get under his skin, as Viserys even kind of alludes to, right? He loves to kind of tease you, right? That wasn't the exact term that was being used, but yeah. But Otto, man, you know, I'm not even entirely sure if Damon actually said that at the brothel. And you see that, you know, he's kind of out of it. Damon, that is, at the brothel. He's kind of disconnected. And I do feel, and you know, they made it quite clear that he does care about family, that he is quite upset about Viserys' loss. You know, the son, Balon, and Emma, who I thought was great in that role, right? It's a limited appearance, of course. I'll get into that in a bit. You know, I'll get into that, but yeah, of course he's upset. You see it at the funeral, right? He steps up, tells Rhaenyra, you know, your father needs you, and you see in his demeanor that he is upset about this. And, you know, him saying to Viserys that all of us mourn differently, right? Yeah, I believe it. I feel like he was out of it. So, you know, it's left a little bit ambiguous if he actually said it, right? He doesn't deny it or anything. You know, maybe it's a case of, even if I deny it, you know, he's not going to believe me. unless he did say it as well. And like I mentioned earlier, Sonoya, I was really quite excited about Sonoya being here. But I must admit, it appears that she is an enabling force, or tries to bring out some of his darker tendencies, right? Missaria, that is. But yeah, her first appearance, it caught me off guard. I did not expect that to be her first appearance, but you could tell, or she could tell almost immediately that something was off as she is being railed by Daemon Targaryen. And, clearly he's not able to climax, and he looks quite frustrated. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that dynamic from this point on. She does fly off at the end there, right? On Caraxes, wow, yeah. I thought it looked really quite good up close as they're kind of touching Caraxes. And, in terms of the dragons and the CGI, yeah, there's going to be quite a bit of that in this show, right? And, looking at it here in episode 1, honestly speaking, at points, it looked good. And at points, yeah, it was noticeably janky, or it looked a little bit out of place, right? And there's a lot of dragons to come, right? So yeah, let's see how that plays out. I felt like some of the shots of Cyrax earlier in the episode, from certain angles, really looked a bit off, right? Like you could really clock it. You can clock the CGI. And then in other moments, it looked quite good. So yeah, there's only so much they can do on that end or on that front. But yeah, I feel like that is one of the challenges of this, because it does have a plethora of dragons to come. But let's kind of get into some of these other characters. For me, the standouts, I've got to say, Rhaenyra, Millie as Rhaenyra, I thought she was great in this. And even her look, right? Millie's look, she's got quite a striking look, right? She's made for that close-up. I love some of these subtle reactions that you get as it kind of does this tight shot of Millie or Rhaenyra, right? Be it at the tourney, be it at the small council as she's taking everything in. I love that. Her going around, kind of listening in on everything. Though, later she does have a bit of a reaction to hearing about something her uncle potentially might have said. She didn't like that. But I thought she looked great. The costume design really, really quite effective here. But, I thought her wig was one of the standouts. It looked really good on her. For others, here and there, you could kind of clock it. And that's always going to be the case, right? It's not always going to look like it's natural. But yeah, she looked quite good. At moments, even Daemon's wig was kind of like, I get the feeling of it kind of being fake. And then, of course, at other points, it looked quite real, quite believable, right? Viserys as well. It kind of applies to everyone almost. But yeah, Rhaenyra, Millie as Rhaenyra, one of the standouts. Corlys, yes. That is a character I really like. I love the acting as well there, right? I love this character's demeanor, his disposition, right? He's a no-nonsense type of individual. He's always trying to get down to business. He also cuts a frustrated figure as well because of how things are handled at the council meetings, small council meetings. His concerns do tend to kind of get brushed aside, don't they? And here's another person who's a great judge of character. He sees through these people. He knows their angles, doesn't he? Right? He even calls them out at one point. And I'm speaking of the other members of the small council, right? So yeah, I think I'm really going to enjoy that character. And, you see that on 2 different occasions, he does back Daemon Targaryen. First, earlier on, as he kind of, reiterates that, the city watch, or, the people need to have this element of fear as well, right? And Daemon thanks him for that. And the second time, he kind of stands in Daemon's corner once again, that he is the next in line, right? As the others are trying to lean towards someone else. Again, someone that might serve them or their interests a bit better than Daemon Targaryen. And of course, Corlys, kind of calls him out on that, doesn't he? He sees through it. So I love that no-nonsense attitude of his, right? I love that moment as he covers the cup, right? As Rhaenyra is about to pour a drink for him. No drink for him. Not at this spot. Not in this place. Yeah, I really like that character. I do. Of course, Otto Hightower. Wow. Of course, like I mentioned, the Hand of the King is always going to be, or at least for the most part, is going to be someone quite fascinating, someone quite ambitious, someone quite interesting. All of those things apply to Otto. You see it on display more so than anything else at the end there as he sees an opening. He sends Alicent, his daughter, to the king's chambers. Yeah, he's not afraid to use his own daughter as a chess piece on the board, essentially, right? Like Damon mentioned, he's the second born son, right, who stands to inherit nothing that he doesn't kind of take for himself, right? But speaking of Damon, there's also parallels to Stannis, right? A lot of parallels to Stannis. Yeah, I felt that was quite noticeable there. And also, I'm not saying that Otto is just out to get Damon because Damon doesn't like him. I'm not saying that he doesn't make some great points, some important points. Yes, Damon, you just can't see Damon being the king, right? It would be disastrous, right? And you see the small council is not wrong in kind of trying to, dodge that or kind of move into a different direction, right? Yes, Corlys brings up Rhaenys, right? The queen who never was. And I love how the cousin, right? The Baratheon cousin, says it out loud. And that's the same cousin who was a little bit hesitant to take the knee, right? And, Rhaenyra kind of notices, doesn't she? She does this really subtle kind of look, right? Like I mentioned, there's a lot of really great subtle acting, a lot of great subtle hand acting as well. Alicent specifically really digging into her fingernails, skin around the fingernails. But of course, the cousin, the Baratheon cousin, it wasn't about Rhaenyra being a woman. It was more so that Rhaenys was kind of overlooked once again. So you could see the reasoning for that, or you could tell the reason he was kind of upset about this. And again, Rhaenyra kind of noticed, though ultimately he does, kind of bend the knee. You see Stark, who looked quite miserable, as expected, to be up there in King's Landing. Though, yes, he was outfitted with Stark armor and sigil, but, I don't know if he really looked the most Stark in that sense, in my opinion, at least. Now, there's two different dynamics I really enjoyed in this. And of course, both of them include Rhaenyra, right? Rhaenyra and Alicent, Rhaenyra and Daemon Targaryen. Let's kind of focus on Rhaenyra and Alicent. I really love that bond they have, that sisterhood, right? That relationship they have. It's kind of like childhood friends, best friends, sisters, and perhaps even a bit more than that. At times, it is alluding to, it is hinting at Rhaenyra having maybe a bit more in terms of feelings for Alicent, right? Unless I'm kind of misreading it. I felt like, yeah, they're hinting at a little bit more, she straight up mentions, she'd rather be off on Syrax, her and Alicent, exploring rather than be here, right? Earlier, she even kind of alludes or kind of hints at Syrax being able to saddle two at this point, but Alicent almost immediately just kind of shuts that down, and you see the look on Rhaenyra's face, right? She's quite disappointed by that, because clearly she wants to spend this time with Alicent. Listen, I'm not gonna get into specifics of the trailers. I have watched some of the trailers leading up to this. But yeah, in the trailers you could see, yeah, it ends up going in a totally different direction. And that's just the nature of things. That's just the nature of the situation they find themselves in, right? That's the court at play, right? They are going to find themselves at opposing ends from the looks of it. There's going to be friction. There's quite a distinct shot in the trailer that is really quite jarring, given the setup here, given the relationship they have here. But yeah, it is sad. It is sad to think about that these two friends, these two close friends, right? Sisters even, they could be sisters, kind of drift apart, don't they? Yeah, and I'm going to see older Rhaenyra and older Alicent at some point. there's a lot of really great moments. Alicent and Rhaenyra, as she's laying on her lap. This is quite a comfortable position. But then, I loved how she just kind of switches on as Alicent gets a little bit agitated and frustrated. And, just kind of goes off and tells her everything about Nymeria, who is name dropped here, right? And I love how she kind of literally rips a page out of Nymeria's book, right? A bit of foreshadowing there, right? It's not the most subtle, but, it was still kind of cool. And then the other dynamic, Rhaenyra and Daemon. I love how it's just them two, and for that reason, they speak in Valyrian, right? It did have this, I don't know, it felt special. It felt intimate even, right? That they have this, right? This bond, that she does enjoy the company of her uncle, right? There is an element of my cool uncle, right? It almost kind of felt like she's kind of living vicariously through Daemon Targaryen, right? Like she mentioned to her late mother, right? I'd rather be out there battling, or I'd rather be out there as a knight, right? Something along those lines. Again, kind of reminding me of Arya. And in that sense, the Arya and Sansa relationship, there's a bit of that in this Alicent and Rhaenyra relationship as well, right? Just a bit. She has respect for her uncle. She's excited by her uncle's presence, right? I loved some of these cuts to Rhaenyra. There's actually a lot of that in here, right? Rhaenyra reacting to Daemon, right? And notice how at the tourney, during Kristen Cole, handsome lad, Kristen Cole and Daemon's tilt, she's really quite excited, right? And almost as if she kind of sits up in her seat. And the whole time she's clutching the necklace that Daemon gave her earlier, right, as a gift. And then, of course, on the opposite end, Daemon clearly cares for his niece. There is that chemistry there. And, I mentioned earlier, Matt Smith and chemistry, they go hand in hand. This guy can have chemistry. This actor can have chemistry with anyone. He's so good. He's so good. But, again, Millie as Rhaenyra, both of them, they just gel. They have this chemistry, don't they? Now, let's kind of get into it, right? That scene, wow, it's quite a jarring scene. It's quite a jarring situation. Quite a shocking situation for sure. Listen, Viserys has to make quite a heartbreaking choice here on one end. At the other end of that, you have Aemma, whose choice isn't even really taken into consideration here. Her agency does not exist in this situation. It's all about the king. It's all about Viserys making that call. Now listen, yes, there's two options here. She's going to die and the unborn child is going to die as well. Or you could try saving the child, who ends up dying anyways. And of course, the track record, and again, earlier, this shows that it is quite ominous. That even if this ends up being a male, the chances of survival are really quite low. It was essentially either he tries to save the baby, and he does, and essentially picks the option that is actively kind of killing her in the most painful manner possible, perhaps, or the other option is let her die passively, but it's still it's not going to be that painful death, right? He took that option. Listen, this is based in that medieval era, right? So of course, there is that element of it. Of course, the patriarchy is certainly playing a part here. If in the trailers, they really kind of lean into that aspect of it. But that's the situation. Those are the times that it was more important for Viserys to at least attempt to save his unborn child. In the hopes that it is a male. I mean, he felt that it was going to be a male, and he was right. I mean, he ended up being right about that. But again, it didn't last long. A few hours, apparently, according to Rhaenyra later at the funeral. And I've got to say, I forgot to mention her delivery of Dracarys. Wow, I really liked it. It felt so authentic, and it really felt like a different language, right? And also, before I forget, I've got to mention the introduction, the cold open. I loved the narration, the exposition through Aemma. I love her cadence. Like I mentioned earlier, she was one of the standouts during the press junkets leading up to it. I loved it. I loved her narration to that. And, it kind of sounded like she's telling the history to someone. That's the feeling I was getting there. that it wasn't just a voiceover for the audience, that it could be her telling the history of the Targaryens to someone young perhaps. You see that it was more important that a potential son be saved rather than his wife, the queen, having not a painless death, or passing on in the most pain-free manner possible. Yet it was the opposite. She ends up dying in the most painful manner, doesn't she? Wow. I mean, she was so confused. She was so scared. So, you know, I don't think you can just you can't just say, oh, those are the times. These, you know, it's based on medieval times, and that's just how things are. You know, it was to let both of them die, or at least try to save the unborn child. You can't just say that. You know, you have to look at it from another perspective as well, right? The queen's perspective, from her perspective, a woman's perspective in that situation. It's quite unsettling, that scene, and it was meant to be. You could tell it's deliberate. And of course, you know, it's cutting back and forth, the intercuts. But, you know, also I've got to say, it felt like some of the killings at the tourney felt a little bit brainless or pointless, right? You're not really supposed to start killing people there, right? And the fact that nothing's being stopped, maybe that's a commentary, or maybe that is alluding to the fact that maybe Viserys is kind of starting to lose control, or he's preoccupied. And he is, right? He is preoccupied. But then, you know, you go back to Game of Thrones, you know, Robert Baratheon, Big Bobby B, steps in himself as the Hound and the Mountain go at it, right? Because, you know, that tussle broke out as the Mountain is trying to take out the pretty boy. God damn it, I can't remember his name. Sir something. Sir Loras, right? So yeah, you know, again, there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of parallels to the early episodes of Game of Thrones. Though, of course, I feel like maybe it's also kind of, you know, a commentary on how some of the brainless killing on that battlefield, though it's not a battlefield, it's a tourney, right? Some of the brainless killing there, and, you know, the other battlefield, you know, Emma. I can't remember if it's Emma or Emma. You know, perhaps a pointless killing there as well, right? But yeah, I think that's about it for this one, folks. Yeah, you know, I've got to say, to me, the characters felt like that they all believe they are the protagonists of their own story, right? That they can kind of hold their own. And you need those types of characters, right? There's ambition. Everyone has their own agenda. Of course, that helps driving that political political drama aspect to this that everyone loved about Game of Thrones, at least early Game of Thrones, you know, the first 4 seasons. That is certainly present here, and there's certainly an ensemble cast that is able to kind of fill in those shoes, right? Unique, interesting characters here in episode 1. And another aspect of this I really enjoyed or appreciated is the character-driven dialogue, right? Good signs, really good signs here in episode 1. And I loved how, you know, it's really done a solid job of establishing its cinematic language, right? Again, you know, a lot of fantastic visual storytelling in this episode as well. So a lot of really good signs, for sure. You know, it's a good start. It's a solid start, you know. Yes, it's not the greatest pilot of all time, but it's a decent one for sure. It's a solid one for sure. Yeah, I think that's about it for this one. You know, of course, the conversation continues in the next episode and the episode after that. Lots to talk about, you know. Before I kind of sign off, Melisandre, you know, that's another thought I had in my mind. You know, she should be alive in this era. Is there a possibility, you know, maybe down the line, there could be a cameo, there could be an appearance by Melisandre, right? So that could be cool. And also, the triarchy, right? Corlys was mentioning the triarchy, the alliance, right? So let's keep that in mind, you know, if that comes into play at some point in the near future, in the next few episodes. So yeah, let's see how it all plays out. But yeah, if you enjoy that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts, and I would love to hear from anyone who's been here before. And if you're interested in full length, consider checking out the Patreon page. Again, it is a timer-based full length. You get your own copy of it and you sync it after a countdown. Also, there's links to social media if you're into that. Okay, right then. Thank you for joining me for this one, folks. I'm really quite excited to be back in there. And I really do hope to see you again soon for the rest of the season. So thank you for your time. This time is precious, and I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.